What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tierfawn Orbital. Nice to meet you. Thanks for stopping by. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you're a return viewer, thanks for coming back. I always appreciate the one or two viewers that I get. So anyhow, we're here to talk about a lightsaber install. This is for the Seeker from Korbanth and Shadowfoil. So this was a head scratcher for me, right? This one was a little bit of a complicated install to figure out, right? Staffs are, this one is based on Marroks, by the way, Marrok from the Ahsoka series. Staff lightsabers are not always easy to design a chassis for, right? So typically with a regular hilt, you've got a tube with a pommel. So really, you've got two choices, right? You can create a removable chassis that just kind of comes out through the bottom of the pommel, or you can do like a static chassis that's held in place with a set screw. But with staffs, you've got emitters at both ends. So you've got to figure out how to approach doing that, right? So sometimes you can have a fully removable, like a whole long chassis. I've seen those before where, like some mall staffs or just one full chassis that you take out of the hilt. So this one was a little bit of a head scratcher. And I like projects like this. It wasn't my run of the mill, like just create a basic chassis, right? For a basic usual install. I liked that I had to engineer a different kind of solution for this one. And there's a lot going on the inside of this hilt because we have these rings, right? And these rings, well, this main ring is attached to the inside of the hilt with screws, right? So these screws protrude to the inside of the hilt. So you've got to take that into account when you're designing your chassis, because the chassis has to slide past those screws. We've got some other screws that protrude a little bit into the hilt. So there's a lot going on space-wise, right? Another thing that you have to take into account is switch placement, right? So we have 3 switches here on one radius of this hilt, and we also have our trigger switch, which is also a really awesome feature of this hilt. So a lot to take into account on this project, right? So it wasn't my run-of-the-mill, just design a chassis, for it. So, but I had a lot of fun with this one. It took me a while. I went through like 8 test prints of the switch and PCB holder alone, right? So it was a little bit of a trial and error kind of deal. But again, like I like projects like this where it really makes me think outside of the box, and it was a lot of fun. So anyhow, there is a lot to talk about as far as how to use the hilt, right? It's a little bit of an intricate process, how to put the chassis inside of the hilt. My approach to this particular one was a little bit different in that it is not a fully removable chassis, right? There is an internal PCB holder that sits right here where the switch section is, and that houses this side of the blade PCB as well as the switches for this, right? So there's one chassis that slides out of the hilt, but there's a little bit of a process to take it out and to secure it, right? So, but before we talk about that, I do want to come into Fusion and talk about the chassis design, and then we'll, of course, come up top, right? So let's come into Fusion. All right, so here it is, right? This is the I don't know, I guess you'd call it a chassis system. This is the chassis that I came up with for the Seeker from Korbanth and Shadowfoil, designed by Shadowfoil, rather, right? So let's start with the top here, right? So this is the upper switch and PCB holder, okay? So we do have four external switches in this hilt, right? So you got 3 on one side, and then we've got that trigger switch on the other side. So obviously these 3 holes are where I have 3 red button tactile switches, and that's what those external 3 switches make a contact to, right? Around back, I have a very small black tactile switch. That is what the yellow trigger switch makes a contact to, right? Proffi does not currently have the ability to do independent blade activation with a single proffieboard. right? It is in development, like it's coming out soon. So that will be a possibility, right, in the future with a future firmware update. I have a feeling, though, actually, so I don't know. I don't know if that will be something that you'll have to put into the config, or if one of these switches will have to be bridged or wired up to one of the free data pads or one of the extra switch pads on the board itself, right? I'm not sure how that's going to work, but as it stands now for this particular install, these they're just wired up to main and aux, right? So we've got a main, 2 aux, and a main around back. That's just how I wired this one up. Okay. At the bottom, we have a 6-rail male end of the PCB. So that is what the lower chassis makes a connection to the upper part of the hilt. Up top, we have a lit PCB emitter. So these channels here, we've got a lot of weird notches in this upper chassis, right? So there are a lot of like screws that are protruding into the inside of this hilt. So in order to slide this PCB down inside of the hilt, I had to make sure there were notches in it, right? Because I can't remove those screws, slide the PCB in, and then put the screws back in place. I had to make sure that the screws were like stayed in place so I could get this PCB down, or get this chassis down in the hilt rather, and secure it in place. The PCB itself is secured in place with a set screw that is underneath the switch cover. The switch cover is just a magnetized cover, right? Which I thought was a great little, if I didn't have that, I'm not sure I would have been able to do this install. I'm glad that there was like a nice little cover I could hide a set screw underneath, right? So that's the upper PCB holder. Here's the main chassis, okay? Strange speaker placement, obviously, right? So this is another thing about staff hilts, right? You've got to figure out what you're going to do as far as sound venting and speaker placement, because you can't put a speaker at the bottom. You've got emitters at both ends, right? With this particular hilt design, there is a mesh area almost in the middle of the hilt that has been designed, I'm assuming, specifically for sound venting, right? So that is where I placed my speaker on my chassis. So it will vent out of those that mesh area on the outside of the hilt. I chose to go with a 22 millimeter Nano Elite speaker from Smuggler's Outpost. I have a feeling you could probably get away with a 24 in here. I chose to go with a 22. I really like the 22s from Smuggler's Outpost. I think they sound great. I think they're comparable to a 24, but obviously with a 22 you can get away with a little bit more space, right? And it made things a lot easier. I could fully enclose it. So I've got a 22 here. Around the circumference of the speaker, I've got, of course, like it wouldn't be a Tirfon chassis without unnecessary LEDs, right? So I've got some rectangular red LEDs around the speaker itself, right? At the bottom, we have a lit blade side PCB. Both of these are from Shadowfoil, of course. Shadowfoil hilt, Shadowfoil blade side PCBs. Battery tray is here. Making our way up. This is where the Proffi sits. Okay, it does kind of slide up underneath this lip a little bit. Plenty of room underneath this guy to, do some wire management. Here is my kill switch. It's my first time doing like a little concave thing on the kill there. Kind of like the way that came out. Did a little bit of ridges on the spine of this hilt, and that's it, right? Female end of that 6-rail PCB is up top. And there we have it. Relatively simple setup for a complicated hilt on the inside. There was a lot going on. That's another reason why I have this flat section on this hilt, this chassis rather, is so this chassis can slide in the other side of the hilt. That didn't make much sense. So, so the reason that this is flat, let me try that again. The reason this is flat is because on the other side of the hilt, we do have those screws as well. The screws that hold in that ring. They are on both ends of the hilt. So I have to make sure that I make room on these chassis so they can slide past those screws. Okay. So that's it. Let's come up top. All right, so here it is. This is the Seeker from Korbanth, designed by Shadowfoil Props. All right, so full disclosure, when I got this hilt, I loved it. So when I saw the production pictures from Ahsoka and I saw Marroks hilt, I really, really liked the hilt. I am not a staff guy. I don't like staff lightsabers typically, right? But there is just something about the design of this hilt that really, really appealed to me. Okay, there's something about the industrial design of this that looked so good to me, right? But up close, this is an absolutely beautiful hilt. This is really well designed. I love the color scheme. I think they really nailed it. It looks really close to the prop, the actual prop, right? So it's a really, really nice looking hilt. Really well machined hilt. It's a really nice specimen, okay? So yeah, great hilt. Let's talk about the chassis. So here's the chassis. I did my typical pass of pewter rub and buff on this. This has been done in PETG carbon fiber PLA, right? There is our blade side PCB at the bottom, 6-rail PCB up top, battery tray. Pretty simple, right? So this is a little bit of a complicated setup, okay? So let's put a battery in this guy. Take note of your negative side of your spring is towards this emitter, right? Take the flat part of your battery, rest it in that battery tray, hit your kill switch. There are those lit rectangular LEDs. Okay? So, once you get your battery in, you're going to want to make sure that these two screws on each side of the emitter are loose. You don't have to take them all the way out. You want to just back them out just enough so they're not like protruding onto the inside of the hilt. There is like a collar here as well. These are on both ends of the hilt. I just leave this one in place. Obviously, you don't need to take that one out, but take this one out before you put the chassis in. The chassis will not fit in the hilt if this is outside of the hilt, okay? So loosen those screws, okay? You want to line up that flat part of the chassis where these ribs are with the ring, okay? And then just kind of slide it in place all the way down until it stops, okay? Then you want to take that collar thing, I don't know what you would call this, but this is essentially the blade holder, right? So you want to take that, there are like notches in it. Line that up with those two silver screws. Slide that all the way down, right? This is going to push that chassis in place and keep it pressing up against that PCB, that upper PCB. This is essentially what holds the chassis in place, right? So what I do is keep pressure on that and tighten these two screws on the side and on the back, right? So there are two black screws on the spine here. I tighten the bottom one first. That will hold that collar in place really well, and then tighten those other two screws on the side, okay? So that is effectively holding that chassis in place. So I've got the blade plug in this end. So one of the things, I know I had those, so initially, full disclosure, right? So my intention when I put those LEDs around the speaker, I was hoping I would get some shine through this vent. Unfortunately, they're just above the lip of this mesh. So you just can't see them, right? So I think in future renditions, if I get another one of these, I don't think I will, but if I do another install, I'll probably put the LEDs a little bit lower so you can get a little bit of shine through here. But Great hilt. Really, really, I love that we can get this trigger as an actual switch, you know? And that 22 sounds great. So let's come down to the bottom. All right, so I know I really breezed through putting that chassis in. It is a little bit of a complicated process, right? It is not like your typical just throw the chassis in the hilt and put the pommel on, obviously, right? But yeah, really great hilt, man. See what else we put on here. So twist to activate, twist to deactivate are on. One more. All right, let's try to put a blade in this guy. I'm not going to put 2 blades in this. All right, so I'm not going to put 2 blades in this, but we'll stick a blade in each end just to make sure it's working, right? So, all right, so blade plugs do ship with the hilt. There are 2 black set screws on both ends of the hilt. You want to loosen that and take out your blade plug. That will also loosen that collar on both ends, obviously. But remember, that collar on your chassis end is what is holding your chassis in place. The collar on the non-chassis end, you can kind of leave in there if you need to. So take that out, take your blade plug out. Rest your blade on those PCB pins and tighten your set screws. Okay. There we go. Let's go back to Marroks here. Let's tighten that blade a little bit better. There we go. I almost hit my window. It's a big hilt. One more. Let's throw this blade in the other end. Okay. Put that blade plug back in. All right. Same process with the other end. Just going to tighten those set screws. One should already be tight because it's holding that collar in place. Oops. This is going to be a little weird because the trigger's on the other end. All right, that's it. It's a big hilt. It's a big hilt to swing around. Anyhow, so that is it. That is the Seeker from Korbanth, designed by Shadowfoil Props. Really, really beautiful hilt. This one was, like I said, it was a head scratcher to do the install for this one. But I really like when I have to think outside of the box and figure out a chassis solution for something such as this, right? So To the customer, thank you for trusting me with your install. Thank you for being a repeat customer, and thank you for your patience. If anyone has any questions about this particular chassis or anything really, please do not be a stranger. I will be adding this chassis to my online chassis index this May 4th, along with a few other new chassis. So there have been a lot of folks asking about this one, so I will be adding it as well. So that's it. That's all I got, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.